The isekai genre is a contentious and oversaturated anime genre in where the main character is transported to another world through magical means, or by reincarnation. Most of these isekais are usually aimed at a demographic of boys and men, sport a male lead, are concerned with giving the main character overpowered abilities, and allow the main character things they were not afforded in their previous life. Since most isekais have a male lead, what's different about an isekai with a woman as the main character? Many isekais have been aimed towards girls and women since its inception, and its adaptable story conventions make it easy to appeal to any demographic the writer chooses. I personally find that despite the chosen target audience, isekais tend to have a broad appeal and are pleasing for anyone to watch due to these story conventions. Underdog gets sent to another world, becomes strong and overcomes, lives the life they always wanted. It's the perfect feel-good story. Women in anime tend to be underserved and underrepresented, though. So where do they stand in this overpopulated genre? I watched 15 different female-led isekais to take a look at the themes of these anime, test their quality against the typical male-led isekai, and to ascertain the demographic they appeal to, or whether or not women would actually like them just because women are in them. The list of anime I watched is as follows. The Do-Over Damsel Conquers the Dragon Emperor, 2024. Dr. Elise, The Royal Lady with the Lamp, 2024. I'm the Villainess, so I'm Taming the Final Boss, 2022. My Next Life as a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom, 2020. Why Raeliana Ended Up at the Duke's Mansion, 2023. Dahlia in Bloom, Crafting a Fresh Start with Magical Tools, 2024. Ascendance of a Bookworm, 2019. All Become a Villainess Who Goes Down in History, 2024. The Saint's Magic Power is Omnipotent, 2021. Villainous Level 99, I May Be a Hidden Boss, but I'm Not the Demon Lord, 2024. Seventh Time Loop, The Villainess Enjoys a Carefree Life Married to Her Worst Enemy, 2024. I've Been Killing Slimes for 300 years and maxed out my level, 2021. Didn't I Say to Make My Abilities Average in the Next Life, 2019. In the Land of Liedel, 2022. And The Magical Revolution of the Reincarnated Princess and the Genius Young Lady, 2023. I acknowledge most of these anime have been released between the years of 2019 and 2024, and that this exploration of female-led isekais is limited to that time frame. The gender of the main character is always female, but some are likely not aimed at a female demographic, considering the gender of the audience that is catered to does not need to be the same as the main character gender. I did want to see what changed with these isekais, considering the gender assigned to the main character, even if they were not aimed towards people of that gender specifically, and if people who were of the same gender as the main character would be willing to watch these anime regardless of the intended audience. I will also refrain from using the terms shonen and shoujo, because despite their typical use, I have realized this is kind of merely a demographic label. Shonen and shoujo do not always work as demographic labels in the West because our tastes as an audience may differ. Many people, regardless of gender in the West, gravitate towards action anime as opposed to other genres, meaning demographic is, it's not going to skew one way or the other for them. So the use of like boys anime or girls anime as a label is inaccurate for the purposes of my research and writing. Let's start with the Do-Over Damsel Conquers the Dragon Emperor, 2024. This may be an unusual storyline to consider an isekai, but she does meet the qualification of being ripped from her current world and put in a new one, albeit one she grew up in. She is sent back in time to when she first becomes engaged to an abusive fiancé. This anime is incredibly suspicious for many reasons, but mostly because of the grooming of our young protagonist, as she is tugged between her two much older than herself suitors. Keeping that in mind, her prior grooming and trauma before her time warp probably explains many of her actions in this anime. Take the story at surface level view, and for the fiction it is, and it's not bad. See the story for its context and the struggles of an underage girl being engaged to someone much older than her, the abuse of her power and trust before and after the time warp, and it becomes an intricate and heartbreaking tale of a young girl who continues to be used by men much older than her. She endures having her hand in marriage being taken by older men twice, because she has to do so to survive, to pick a lesser evil. She seems happy with the Dragon Emperor, but quelling the rage and trauma of an adult is not the fate she should endure at the age of 10, even if her previous self was 16. The Dragon Emperor is called out about his sickening obsession with young girls for the most part, though, so it isn't as if the characters around him approve and praise him for this behavior. At the very least, this isn't typical in-world behavior, and it isn't played off as the typical young girls were married off to older men in royal society excuse. In the end, it really is just animated as a silly, lighthearted anime with a lot of physical and romantic conflict. There's plenty of fantasy and royalty tropes from the start, and an enemies-to-lover conflict as well. It does well to establish the fantasy immediately, so that the expectations for the story are clear, and leaves clues about the mystery of her time warp so the audience can slowly try to decipher what happened. It tends to tiptoe around what the protagonist's actual age is a lot, even though her younger age is something that saves her from her untimely doom, probably because of how unseen it is in the face of her position in the story. She also envisions herself as the age she was when she was sent back to the past, not the age of her current body, which is extremely convenient for her relationship with the Dragon Emperor. It conveniently makes sense story-wise since it is built into the plot, but ultimately the lack of an age-appropriate suitor for our protagonist really hurts the chances of this being a very good romance anime, despite how cute it may appear on the surface. Dr. Elise, the Royal Lady with the Lamp, 2024. The premise of this isekai truly sets it apart from the rest. An arrogant princess reincarnates into the modern era, becomes a healthcare professional, and is ripped from her new important position to find herself right back in her original world. This is an exciting and groundbreaking anime for introducing the medical drama right into the middle of a royal romance isekai. It feels right at home next to any high-stakes medical TV show, but also some Victorian-era dramas. There's a little bit of magic slipped in, of course, as isekais are wont to do, but the subtle uses of it in the story actually add to its charm. The detail that her previous fiancé disguises himself with magic to see her as an everyday person is truly heart-fluttering, as he shows that he wants to know her like anyone else, and not as her arranged betrothed. Her character growth from a selfish princess into a doctor before the story begins is also very interesting and keeps things fresh, as she tries to atone for the things she did in her first life. It's an isekai that's very well done in terms of animation and pacing, and is sure to keep anyone invested. I'm the Villainess, so I'm Taming the Final Boss, 2022. If you want an anime that ends like Grease, 1978, this is the anime for you. This is one of many isekais where the protagonist has played the otome version of their current life, giving her a leg up in her struggles or confusing her when the plot takes a turn not seen in the game. The plot of the game isn't always that clear, but it isn't a very complex anime. It's a cute romance where our heroine has to find a way to fix the love interest's life before it goes downhill and prove herself worthy as a ruler as well, which is actually fairly typical of many royal romantic plots. One thing that stuck with me was that she takes the atelier route and begins selling wares, in this case beauty products, in order to help her gain status and funding. She is one of the many heroines to do this, and I think it's actually a really important trope to take note of. Many of the young women in these stories wish to take agency over their own lives, especially after a breakup, a death in the family, or some other traumatic event, and turn to product creation as and business. It appears to be a more common trope when the protagonist is a woman, especially when she comes up with the product herself. Even in Spice and Wolf, I often felt that the wolf goddess did a better job selling the merchant's wares than he did himself. Though simple, this isekai also decides to take some wild liberties with its 12-episode runtime to make up for its shortness. When you only have one season, you can take as many risks as you want, and although it could have taken more, it does some interesting things differently for an isekai. Our villain-turned-heroine, Eileen, isn't the only reincarnated player for one, something that's actually unusual. The land of Liedel also has other player characters reincarnated, but none of them oppose the protagonist or challenge her in the same way as they do here. Not only that, but our leading lady gets an interesting love interest. Vampiric, dark, and long-haired, Claude is a wonderful foil to our happy-go-lucky lead. Many of the love interests in these isekai are handsome, but none are more memorable than Claude, who belongs in a Castlevania ripoff. I find that these two characters really make up for the runtime of this isekai and make it a fun weekend watch. My next life is a Villainess. All Routes Lead to Doom, 2020. Probably one of the better feel-good isekais with the premise that the leading lady has played this otome game before. The protagonist finds herself at the center of a male and female cast who are all ready to throw themselves at her for all the right reasons when she's reincarnated into an otome game she once loved. This anime is probably the best example of a villain gone good, and her efforts really show when all the romanceable characters consider themselves her friends, as well as candidates for her hand in marriage. This one runs longer than many of the other animes in the genre, with 2 seasons, an OVA, and a movie available, which really shows its deserved popularity. The anime really hits a lot of popular tropes in this kind of isekai, including a royal lifestyle setting, romance, magic, and a found friend group. There's also an element of farming or gardening, which is sometimes seen as a popular endeavor among women, and is historically a job shared by both men and women. It's seen in only a few of these isekais, but brings to mind the farming simulator, another genre popular among women as of the current time. It's used by the heroine to try to increase her magic power related to the earth, but isn't an ultimate failure, though she persists anyways. One might see that as her only feeling of control in this world, where she might suddenly be outed as the villain and be expelled from her position. My Next Life as a Villainess also plays as a comedy and doesn't take itself too seriously, most likely adding to its popularity. As a protagonist, Katerina tries to avoid the bad ending otome routes the villain is fated to end up in, she tends to make a livable fool of herself. She never once considers that her fate probably isn't up to a video game anymore, and that she might have a chance of a good ending now that she, as the main antagonist of the game, is no longer ruthlessly mean. This really enhances and drives the story as she identifies red flags in the world that might take her to a bad ending, and she scrambles to make sure that she takes the right path. Her character is enjoyable to watch and follow along as she debates with herself on what to do next while still benefiting those around her. Why Raeliana Ended Up at the Duke's Mansion, 2023. A Regency-era mystery isekai that also follows the protagonist has read this book trope. Raeliana is an acceptable entry into the royal romance isekai subgenre. The fantasy elements seem a bit out of place when they pop up mid-season, but the lack of explanation might also best be explained by the notion that it's natural in this world, and so the protagonist and cast have not spoken of it. The idea of a monster hunt instead of a fox hunt is intriguing, so having that in place of the classic hunt was a success. The mystery of this anime is also incredibly intriguing and keeps the audience wondering, as well as the protagonist. Originally, Raeliana is supposed to be the driving force of the story as a dead side character that initiates the heroine to show up and solve her murder. Unfortunately, Raeliana is not dead, and the heroine is nowhere to be found, mysteriously not answering letters and showing up menacingly in background shots. While trying to prevent her plot-driving death and find out where the original protagonist must have disappeared to, Raeliana traps the main love interest into an engagement. The main issue with this isn't that the original protagonist is supposed to marry him, but rather her attitude towards him. The cold attitudes in an arranged marriage and a Regency plot is fairly typical, and works pretty well when the two do not love each other. However, though she does not love the Duke, there doesn't seem to be a reason to hate him either. He helps keep her safe from her murderous fiancé by going all along with the act that they've been seeing each other in secret, and even agrees to her contract deal even though he doesn't have to. She acts a bit too coldly towards someone who helped save her life, and although it might work for her personality, the viewer has to wonder if she's towing the line of getting herself killed anyways. In reality, it may be that she can't mask the personality from her original life and she's not willing to act nicely towards the Duke, but it becomes a bit frustrating to watch when the Duke is perfectly capable of acting the part and the protagonist isn't even trying. Dahlia and Bloom, Crafting a Fresh Start with Magical Tools, 2024. Dahlia's reincarnation has hardly anything to do with the story and honestly could be completely ignored if the viewer so wished to forget that it was an isekai. One might call this a subtle isekai as a protagonist's past life affects their actions subconsciously. She takes up being an artificer of magic tools and makes objects from her modern-day past for the new fantastical world she lives in. The romance and drama are subtle as well, but effective. The main draw to this anime is watching Dahlia bloom in her new life in a way she couldn't in her past life, making objects that really help people. When she finds herself all alone and strives to make her life work anyways, her resilience, creativity, and willingness to help others draws people into her, surrounding her with a supportive and lovable cast of characters that makes her world rich. It's a gentle and comforting anime, as well as one where Dahlia proves she has agency on her own, but still accepts the help of others when offered, proving that even though you can do it yourself, it's nice to have others that help. Ascendance of a Bookworm, 2019. This isekai is a personal favorite of mine for its excellent premise and brief title. Its story is paramount to the viewer's enjoyment, and the reincarnation is crucial to the plot as her previous knowledge helps her transform the world around her. The hunger of the main character to make the world around her acceptable to live in really makes it a scintillating watch, as the lack of readable books drives the heroine to seek ways to print books commercially. Though her end goals seem selfish, the results would bring a lot of much-needed reform to the world around her, transforming it beyond recognition. She also isn't overpowered magically and even suffers an illness that overflows her system with mana. This adds a lot of stake to the story than just bringing widespread knowledge to the people, despite this plot point being of much importance. It's certainly a contrast to the magically overpowered isekai protagonist that we tend to see in many of these stories. Magical handicaps aren't nearly as frequent, although it is seen in My Next Life as a Villainess, where the heroine could barely use any magic at all. The one in Ascendance of a Bookworm is much more prevalent and important to the plot. Her illness is life-threatening and puts her into a situation where she needs to compromise with the church of this world despite their differing goals. This isekai has a lot of meat to it, a lot of moving gears, and a really unique premise that would satiate anyone looking to watch a new reincarnation anime. I'll Become a Villainess Who Goes Down in History, 2024. This isekai checks the boxes for romantasy, royal setting, and villain reincarnation, and uses those modifiers to its advantage. She has also played this story as a game before, and now should do it again as she pleases, since she gets to be the villain. She decides she wants to be the best villain she can be, but seems to make the world around her better by trying to do so. Not only that, but she believes this is the true goal of villainy. In some ways, she's really just trying to be the villain of other people's stories, not necessarily being the villain of hers and not of the world. Could it be that the role of a villain is to push others to be good, therefore increasing the good in the world? She makes for an interesting lead and makes you think about the role of the villain in the story. It isn't the most complex anime, but it is intriguing where many are not. It also subverts the trope of the main character who gets reincarnated as the villain only to become docile and polite. In some ways, she's the only one doing it right. The ways in which she turns her villainy into good deeds really sets this up as an isekai to be remembered. Saint's magic power is Omnipotent, 2021. This romantasy feels as classic as Fruits Basket, the every woman protagonist included. A typical summoning isekai, the protagonist is scorned for looking too plain until she proves her worth as the saint. As the title reveals, Sei is all-powerful, which is typical of many isekais. She doesn't have the best grasp on her powers or how to use them in small amounts, however, and also doesn't want to draw attention to them. Despite her best efforts, she is recognized by the nobility as the saint and is guided into helping cleanse their world of darkness. When she isn't fighting monsters and healing soldiers, though, she's doing exactly as she pleases. She is another crafty protagonist who loves to make products, and Sei is fond of potion making. Her crafting and healing work are reminiscent of some of the other female-led isekais, and this sort of work ties her femininity into nurturing and healing, something more stereotypically tied to women. Like My Next Life as a Villainess, there's also an element of gardening, although it's part of her job as a potion maker. Also adds to that nurturing personality of hers. This doesn't undermine her as a person, though, especially since the other female side characters are never doing the same things as her. Perhaps it's supposed to make her appear average and relatable, as her appearance and gentle attitude are. But with all of the unique protagonists within isekai, that actually makes her stand out more. It's a lovely anime with the romantic ending that it deserves and makes it a good one-time watch. Villainess, level 99. I may be the hidden boss, but I'm not the demon lord. 2024. Eumelia might be one of the funniest villain reincarnation protagonists yet, wishing to live a life unbothered by others, but accidentally overpowering herself out of boredom. She is such a unique protagonist in the otome world she is reincarnated into, that her out-of-place personality and lack of knowledge surrounding social etiquette drive the story into near comedic directions. She does seriously dangerous things with such nonchalance and disregard of the people around her that she has the audience cracked up and the other characters believing her to be a villain despite her intentions being good. This Otome reincarnation anime also plays with the idea that the endings are set in stone, that the game programming is still present in the world despite it being real. I wouldn't rule out the idea that Yumelia is autistic either, and that it is the driving force of the plot. Her willingness to do seemingly tedious tasks for hours on end, her unbothered personality, her lack of understanding around the social rules really points to this. Even her obsession with the particular Otome game that she's reincarnated into really makes her seem like she just happens to have autism too. That would actually make her not only a fantastic protagonist, but great representation too. With the protagonist's unique personality and this isekai's interesting take on the Otome game reincarnation rules, this isekai is absolutely worth watching. 7th Time Loop. The Villainess enjoys a carefree life married to her worst enemy, 2024. Another anime that some may not technically see as an isekai, but instead as a Groundhog Day storyline, where one culminating event seems to send the protagonist back to the same beginning each time. 7th Time Loop has an interesting premise that captivates the imagination, as a heroine rewinds back to her broken engagement announcement each time she dies because the war finally reached her. It does an excellent job of tying all of her experience and her causes of death together into her 7th life, as the cause of the war and her death finally connects her the moment she reincarnates in the form of a proposal. The man who causes the war sweeps her up as his next fiancé, and thus begins the culmination of all her other lives. It has the typical romantasy trope and royalty setting, as well as the protagonist's love for inventing and selling wares, which has become very popular for these women-led isekais, as well as gardening. These are tropes very often tied to women as makers of clothes, cosmetics, food. Our heroine, Riche, uses her many talents discreetly and in secret so as to get the upper hand on those around her, making her unique in her own way, growing her own herbs to make nail polish to secure her own small bit of income as the fiancée of the prince. Many of the protagonists are not very tricky or deceitful, but she usually only does this in a way that benefits everyone. Although at first it almost seems like she might use it to destroy someone's reputation, she does not. To the ends of all her machinations, the use of all her skills and schemes, she gives herself power over her situation in any way that she can, making her a protagonist that is powerful not magically, but mentally, making her an intriguing protagonist to follow. I've been killing slimes for 300 years and maxed out my level, 2021. A slice of life isekai with a found family trope that is hardly outside the norm for this genre, this anime is cute, silly, and has enough story to hold the audience's attention. The demographic isn't exactly clear, but with the amount of fan service in this isekai, it isn't hard to believe that it was originally geared towards young men. It has a feminine edge to it, and the protagonist gains 2 daughters to nurture and a found family of young women to spend time with. It has a good sense of humor, and though it's flashy with its cute cast of women, it's somewhat neutral enough for a female audience to enjoy. I even suspect the show would resonate pretty well for an audience of women-loving women. Most of the women in the anime only seem to be interested in other women in the first place, and you could and should cite the fetishization of lesbians here, but at the same time, it seems close to being appealing to a lesbian audience, with nary a man in sight in this slice of life isekai. Watch at your own risk, but there's not much to this anime as a whole besides cute, girly, fantasy life fan service. Didn't I say to make my abilities average in the next life, 2019? This anime is a funny but trite cute girl isekai with a found family and slice of life monster hunting. It's a short, anime-referencing, cutesy, monster-fighting isekai with not much else to offer. The girls care about each other, they're cute, they compare chest sizes too often, and that's it. The idea of having the average most abilities of all beings on the planet is interesting, but what they do with it is boring. There's also a bit of the power of friendship in there, and if the story took its ideas of our world being a lost civilization and the magic world being the future further, it could be really interesting. Sadly, it focuses on chest jealousy and too many poorly done anime references to the point of unwatchability. The demographic for this anime has to be the most bored person on the face of the planet. This isekai is one of many with few redeeming qualities. In the Land of Liedel, 2022. This anime is disappointing for many reasons, but you can see the typical isekai tropes within it immediately. A little bit sword art online, a little bit slice of life. The main character wakes up in their favorite virtual reality game after dying in their hospital bed, and while exploring their game 100 or more years in the future, discovers other players trapped there as well. The biggest disappointment with this anime is that we never find out why the game world went offline officially, or how the other players ended up as their avatars there. It's focused much more on introducing characters, showing off the main character's powers, and tidying everything up into a slice-of-life ending. I've noticed that many isekais don't explain the previous worlds, sometimes to the detriment of the plot and story. In Sword Art Online, it's a pivotal plot point, it drives the story. With an isekai so similar, I can only be disappointed in what this could have been, a laid-back video game mystery story. The protagonist doesn't even really seem to care why she's there, or about her digital children as much as one might expect given her death and re-entrance into the world. The shock that she's stuck there forever doesn't seem to faze her much, and she just diligently claims old territory and old memories until she decides to retire. An overpowered badass travels their old stomping grounds, meets old friends, lays down roots. End of story. But it could have been much more, and it reeks of disappointment. The Magical Revolution of the Reincarnated Princess and the Genius Young Lady, 2023. This magical royal reincarnation anime is a short and sweet piece of isekai to enjoy, is subtle about its reincarnation roots until the very last episode, and has an enjoyable romance between the two main girls that even includes a kiss. Not all girls love animes and even end up with their romantic leads together, but the Magical Revolution keeps these two together until the very end. The plot is simple but effective. Our protagonist, Elise, is a royal heir who cannot cast magic and gives up her claim to the throne to develop ways to use magic without mana. She handles the atelier trope with gusto and loves to hunt down materials for her experiments herself. Her friendly, nurturing side lets her make friends with her romantic interest with ease, as well as with her brother's romantic interest. All these things culminate in the final battle where her abilities are of the utmost importance, as well as her relationships to her friends. This anime sort of ends like Grease 1978 too. It's worth at least one watch. Isekai is a popular genre, so it would make sense that they would use tropes, themes, and aesthetics that are most appealing to the demographics they're aiming at as well. Not all of the isekais with female leads are meant for that demographic, but they still tie in with tropes and themes related to women when they aren't. That is to be expected, as some themes would be used stereotypically alongside women whether the content was meant for them or not. The isekais that are aimed towards women play well into the tropes that young women tend to enjoy, like romantasy and royal drama, and generally seem to know their audience well. This includes themes generally tied to women and feminine characters like crafting, healing, escape, also. Many of the storylines that tend to revolve around women typically are also used, such as kidnapping, arranged marriage, forced servitude. Although women generally have more rights today than they have had historically, storylines of servitude and arranged marriage are still very important and continue to be relatable to many, and thus serve as an outlet for those feelings of entrapment even in the current day. They also serve as a reminder of women's struggles historically, which is surprisingly aware of the isekai genre, but probably one of the reasons it is so popular. Many women still feel stuck in unloving relationships, caretaking roles, and jobs they are stereotyped into. If anything, the least aware of these isekais were the ones meant to appeal to a male demographic, which is sadly unsurprising. It also means isekais really do take the most popular things it can find and makes them into really marketable, watchable, and easily reproducible content, which is the point of a very lucrative genre. It's easier to churn out something on an industrial level when its contents are widely known to be popular, like romance, for example. Despite being almost industrial in the size of its library, many of the isekai do a good job at capturing the stories loved by women and are fun and interesting to watch. It was actually surprising to some degree how it captured the complex emotions of their romantic forays, whether their love interests were infatuated or just looking to gain societal mobility through marriage. The depths of their plans when choosing a fiancé, especially in the royal and regency era dramas. Exploration of the jobs women tend to take on, like crafting cosmetics, useful tools, healing, gardening, farming, were also very much appreciated, since women historically have always contributed to such things but have always gotten less credit. The mirroring of the entrapment of women into marriage or servitude is also well explored, and it is very validating for the audience to see, and their journeys of escapism through their crafts are especially appreciated. Of course, many of the tropes associated with women are popular with men as well. It's mostly about the appeal to the demographic, despite any double standards that may exist. Farming simulators were originally geared towards young men, after all, but are beloved by women for their romances, ties to nature, and their peaceful and nurturing form of gameplay. Perhaps that is to say, humankind as a whole is tied to things like romance and farming inextricably because love and agriculture created civilization. These tropes are used because they're very human. Men should be able to enjoy romance, women should be able to enjoy farming. These things can and should be enjoyed because they are human things, not just feminine or masculine things, of which we ascribe some meaning to try to understand. And, in the end, one could consider a trope or aesthetic feminine or masculine depending on how they're looking at it. Yet in Isekai, these tropes and storylines are still more prevalent in the female-led stories, while many of the male-led stories tend to be driven by fantasy and action, and goals tend to be along the lines of saving the world as a whole, not just their own life. The one trope that seemed much more prevalent in the women-centered isekais, though, were the stories focused on women brought to the world of their fantasy novels and games. Stories like Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint and Sword Art Online seem to be similar, but no other demographic seems to be as obsessed with appearing in their favorite game or book as women do. Most of the isekais centered around men set up their life in an all-new, unknown world. Perhaps it has something to do with enjoying guidelines to life, or always knowing your opponent's next move, and having security in knowing what's going to happen next, but it is always entertaining watching the protagonist grapple against the narrative itself as an antagonist. Ultimately, there was more diversity in the stories of the female-led isekais, despite the overlapping tropes, themes, aesthetics, compared to some of the male-led ones. Many were surprisingly satisfying to watch, despite the reputation isekai has, and I even expected more to be worse than they actually were. Hopefully more male-led isekais take its inspiration from the female-led ones, because in between curating my collections of isekai, I watched Campfire Cooking in Another World with my absurd skill, and was generally surprised at how fun it was, despite some flaws. If more of the isekais had less to do with being all-powerful physically and the protagonists had more power mentally, I think they would be more fun to watch, because if we think isekai is saturated, action-adventure anime definitely is.